globe, good morning and good afternoon. I hope that everyone is keeping well. My name is Moeketsi Kwahela, and I will be your moderator for today's proceedings where we are launching the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation's National Essay Writing Competition against Racism publication. And it is a privilege to gather in this space at a time when I think our country, South Africa, and indeed the world needs courageous, visionary, and of course, ethical voices more than ever on contemporary social issues we are faced with. Now, why are we here? What is the purpose? What is our why of this publication launch? It is important to note, colleagues, that the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation Anti-Racism Program has annually hosted the National Essay Writing Competition Against Racism since 2016, where young people, essentially between the ages of 15 and 21, have really been encouraged by the foundation to enter the competition by submitting essays based on racism related topics, of course not exceeding more than 1.5 words, right? In its sixth year, specifically in 2022, the essay writing competition really became creative. The team, led of course by the advancing non-racialism manager Retabile Ratsomo, sat down and said, let's be bold, right? Let's introduce new mediums for participants to enter. And some of these new mediums that we've been exploring since 2022 has been poetry, original artwork, and of course, sometimes original 2-minute songs where young people get to tell us their own lived experiences around some of these racism related topics, right? Now, the inclusion of various mediums has really been intended to increase participation in the competition, but also to provide alternative means of expression, given that we know that our young people and certainly this young generation refuses to be boxed in any way. And, having said that, for me, it is really equally a privilege to gather in this space where the competition is currently in its 9th year, 1 year short of a decade. And tonight we are essentially celebrating the young voices, the essayists, the writers, and the artists who contributed to the 2024 essay writing competition, which is essentially the 8th edition of this great work led, like I said earlier on, by the advancing non-racialism manager at the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, Retabile Ratsomo. Now, these critical voices, colleagues, are needed more than ever before because I think, South Africa and indeed the world, like I said earlier on, needs these young, courageous, visionary, and ethical young leaders more than ever, who at best are going to get us to critically think about our societies and the multiple crises we are navigating, of which racism and its sometimes dire consequences are but a few to note. Now, just a few housekeeping things that I would like for us to note. Just a kind request to make sure that our mics are on mute when some of the presenters are on platform, but also we'd appreciate you engaging on the chat box. If a speaker, for example, notes something that sparks an idea or thought or question that you might have, I will certainly make time as the moderator before we wrap up to read those comments and engage. But also for those of you who are on social media or who have social media, we would really appreciate you assisting us to amplify the conversation we're having today, whether you are on Facebook, X, or former Twitter, you're on Instagram or TikTok. Our hashtags for tonight are hashtag essay writing, hashtag youth voices. And essentially, really, our social media team is ready to repost, to reshare, and spread the word further. On X or former Twitter, for those of us old enough to know it as Twitter, we are at Kathrada Found, Found. On Facebook, we are Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. On Instagram, we are at Ahmed_Kathrada_Foundation. I'll repeat that. On Instagram, we are at Ahmed_Kathrada_Foundation. Now, colleagues, I just thought it would be, quite useful as we begin tonight to acknowledge some of these times that we are navigating, like I said, in South Africa, but essentially the globe. And I think, one of the things that I think we've seen is that as our country continues to face complex challenges, particularly spotlighted by the dramatic shift in political leadership with the advent of the government of national unity, I think we find ourselves at a pivotal moment, right? This is a moment certainly that calls for our young people, our youth, who can navigate a volatile, uncertain, complex, and certainly ambiguous world with integrity, resilience, and adaptability. But also, to quote the words of the AKF Executive Director Nishan Bolton, the 2024 publication of the National Essay Writing Competition Against Racism is really launched against the background of rising global intolerance, where anti immigrant sentiments, Islamophobia, anti Semitism, anti Blackness, and other forms of prejudice continue to rise. Yet, as we have seen in the writings and artworks submitted for the year 2024, there's also some deep resilience, right? There's this bold reimagining of belonging and really a refusal by our young people to accept racism as the norm. And really, the range of voices deeply moved the foundation, the diversity of thought, of which some of which will be shared here tonight, and the personal truths that each writer has entrusted us with. Some essays interrogated essentially the legacies of apartheid and how they manifest in present day inequalities. Other young people explored here racism in popular culture, in language, and really in the subtle interactions of our everyday lived experience. All of them, these young people, demanded that we stop looking away. This generation is not merely inheriting the legacies of the past, but they're actively reshaping the present and demanding better for our future. Close quote. Now, colleagues, we have gathered incredible speakers from across the public and private sectors, academia, and civil society to share insights that will empower us to become the global citizens we ought to be in advancing non racialism and give the world a much more equal and I think socially just face. And now, without further ado, this webinar is officially open. And please help me welcome our first speaker for tonight, Mr. Skalk van Heerden, who is the founder of Beate Rendes, to set the tone for this important gathering by just sharing with us his own reflections on building belonging and social cohesion. Skalk?
Good evening. Thank you very much. Can someone just give me a sign that I'm audible? I'm not
You are
asking
audible.
for I'm not asking for intelligible that you'll figure out later. But at least if you can hear me for now. I'm gonna take the time that I have to give kind of like a personal reflection, so not a lecture, although I have some background in academics. Um, if I look if I look back at my life, I've spent, unlike most Afrikaners whose dad was a farmer. He doesn't have the land anymore, by the way. But after school, I spent about 20 years living just among black people in various places. And it really changed me a lot. And I've learned things that I could have never learned. But then, just approaching 40, I really felt that I have to go back to my tribe. And what I'd call it Bikoing, because Steve Biko said the best thing you can do as a white guy is not to help others, but to fix your own tribe. So for the last 10 years, I've been back taking the advice of Steve Biko, saying, how can I make a difference in my own ethnic tribe, if I can call it that way? I won't say that's my people, but that's my ethnic tribe. So I'm speaking tonight about lessons learned from the belly of the beast. And why I'm calling it that way is when I was about 40, so that's 10 years ago, I tried to think, okay, let me go back and reach the Afrikaner, and where are the Afrikaners? And I quickly realized they in exactly the same place where I left them in 94, and that's in the Dutch Reformed Church, because there not much have changed. They've apologized in theory, but not much have changed in the Dutch Reformed Church. So when I went back and I joined the church of my youth, which I abandoned for 20 years, I found things pretty much the way they were when I grew up. And that's been my journey of anti-racism. And tonight I'm going to speak a lot about words because if I talk about my lessons learned, most of the lessons was about how I speak and how I view people and how I talk so that I can reach the objective. I'm sure everyone on this call is an expert, understanding all the theory. And when we talk about a word like non-racialism, it gets critiqued heavily with the kind of a rainbowism naivety that denies reality, that denies justice. So I understand the problems with the idea of non-racialism, but I cling to it in a way saying that we must get there one day. Maybe that's what heaven will look like, or one day, beyond one day, there'll be non-racialism. But I think where I've shifted from that non-racialism that leads to being colorblind and those type of things, I became very comfortable with the idea of anti-racism, and I understood that even though I'm an Afrikaner, but then engaging others beyond myself, I realized that if I do anti-racism work every single time, there's no one that shows up besides black people and skulk. So I had to figure out if my goal is anti-racism, how do I need to speak? Because anti-racism, in a way, lost a bit of its credibility um, because people were getting, sorry, I'm speaking from personal now, so angry and polarized and combative almost that the racists I wanted to change were just running away when I came with my anti racism flag. So I had to figure, and that was, I think, mostly because of social media, cancel culture, and calling out things. It became so popular. But in my whole life, I've always had the grace from black people, white people, my family, whoever. If I mess up, people always gave me the chance, sometimes strict, sometimes kind, but the chance to change. So when I'm talking about my work in anti-racism, I'm so arrogant that I think racists can change. So it's kind of like a beyond racism. So I don't want to be anti-racist, just calling them out, just canceling them, getting them into trouble for being racist. I want to dig deep and actually journey with people to change. And it's something that's very scarce in our country in terms of organizations, individuals, companies, government. I'm finding very few people that really believe that this disease of racism can be cured. And it's kind of like we adapted just saying, how can I limit the damage? And the effect it had on white people and on people who's racist is they stopped asking, what should I say? What shouldn't I say? To what am I allowed to say? And what will I get into trouble for? And then we started getting very strong necks because now it wasn't a thing anymore of should I say it? It's just where can you say it? So people talk and then before they speak, they go like this and they just look around to see who's nearby and then they'll decide what they say. And that's for me sad. I don't want racists just to be quiet and private and having the freedom around the fire or church or wherever to talk as they want. I want complete healing and freedom because I'm speaking from this Afrikaner perspective tonight. And there's a huge freedom beyond our racial fears and anger and frustration and nonsense. So I'm digging deep to get to that. So I don't want to just dismantle the white monopoly capital. I want to dismantle the idea that we must cling and that reverse victimhood and all those things. So it's in a way it is arrogant to aim for that, um, but that's kind of my calling. So the first thing is if I use the word racism at all, I seldom get results in reducing racism. And I experiment with different terms. The cheapest, quickest one, which just gets you maybe a little bit of momentum, but it doesn't reach far, is the Springboks have a slogan, Stronger Together. And that could sometimes be a little bit helpful if they win. If they lose, no one's interested in the Springboks anymore. Um, and then even something like unity, talking about unity, um, when you tell a white person unity in diversity, they get very angry and you lose them on this journey against racism. But then even just picking unity, not diversity, it still triggers them. So I'm on this always this journey to figure out how do I speak to people to get them to move in the right direction. And in the I resisted for about 8 years to do it, but the last few years things have been so bad that I've started compromising even more. So I would start now to engage people in saying, how do we build a safe, unified country? Because that safety plays into their own fears and almost like your my selfish desires is a safe future for my kids. But then in that I'm teaching, saying there can be no safety for one group and not safety for another group. So those are some of the compromises I do every week. Um, Starting maybe with safety and a future where my children will be welcome in this country, and it's kind of more of a pragmatic approach than just the direct hitting people with right and wrong and do's and don'ts. And then after a long journey of really affirming, and I know people are hurtful, they don't want to affirm racists, but I'll affirm them because once they feel a bit more relaxed and safe, I can start digging deeper. And instead of talking about racism, I'm these days talking a lot about what is it like to have struggles with inferiority and superiority. And that's kind of a paradigm that I think helps people to understand better is that many people feel inferior or are being treated as an inferior. And I have a very vivid memory. One of my friends passed away, Bongani Sibeko, but his dad was David Sibeko, that helped to found the PAC, and they were pretty radical. And Bongani was very radical. He always just shouted at me, although we were friends. He always just told me everything I'm doing wrong, and but we loved each other. And then one day I dared ask him a question and burdening him with my problems. And I said, Bongani, what do you actually want from me and from us? Like to be a good little mlungu, what I know it's my job, but if you had to say what, and I expected him talking about giving the land back and learning Tswana and Zulu and Xhosa and marrying a black woman. I expected a very long list to make up and to guide us. And Bongani Sibeko just looked at me and for a second he put down all that confidence he had as a man, and he said, "Actually, all we want is to be treated as equally human." And it completely flattened me because in my whole life, I've never felt subhuman. In my whole life, I never struggled with feeling very special as a human being. And that angle of Bongani telling me about just a dignified, shared, equal humanity made it much easier for me to understand my own journey and bring others along the journey of anti racism. So that's kind of a soft one. And I'm very pragmatic. So at the moment in South Africa, Dudula is a big thing. And many Afrikaners are buying popcorn and watching how South Africans fight black among colored and against the people that's not born in South Africa, and we're enjoying. And I warn my own tribe. I say, listen, once people figure out the Zimbabwean waitress and the Malawian garden worker is not your big problem, we as whiteys will be next again. And so we have to get through this thing of racism to get to non racialism and not around it. And it's very difficult. The past week, my phone hasn't stopped just about Charlie Kirk. So in the Afrikaner community, never mind Palestine, DRC, wherever people, South Africa, where people are dying, this one death kind of stopped the whole tribe and split us in two. So we have very big, serious issues that won't go away, and we need to find ways of solving them that's not about fighting one side versus the other. And I just have three words to offer for anyone that really is intent on journeying towards being anti-racist. Because if you're on a journey, you're going to compromise. Otherwise, we're just like a judge that just says guilty, guilty, guilty. But if you want a journey, the steps that we try and take, even at Beter Einders, is to figure out a phase of learning respect, deep respect, um, and built on the respect foundation, we can grow understanding, and after the understanding, the deeper understanding, then we could reach trust. And I find white people are not resisting to say we want to respect, we want to understand, and we want to trust. So for me, instead of talking about anti-racism and blah blah blah, anything with the word racism in it, I take people on this journey of respect, understanding, and trust, and somehow they're happy with that. Maybe a last example is when I started out as a younger person with more hair, um, I was talking about restitution and reconciliation, and my tribe doesn't go along with that. And then, even in Afrikaans, gerechtigheid, justice, and verzoening, and nothing worked. And then I picked two very simple words. In Afrikaans, it is staan saam en werk saam, standing together and working together. So the one refers to the relationships, and the other one refers to the material change that needs to happen. And that balanced approach of staan saam and werk saam have opened many doors across the country of people actually starting on this journey. So maybe tonight I'm just, as I said, speaking from the belly of the beast, that Afrikaner tribe that early in the 90s we still wanted to change and be non-racist. Now we just want to hide. Not me, I'm just saying as a tribe. So things have gone bad and backwards. And I'm just sharing tonight that we're in a very difficult, dark spot as a tribe, and we need a lot of everyday heroes to step up and to compromise to lead us out of this capture of of racism. So I hope some of my words gave you some ideas, and I'm going to land it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Skalk, for taking us on your journey of anti-racism. And I think really at the core of your message, it's it underscores how wonderful this thing called diversity is, right? That yes, we may all come from different worlds, different contexts and background, but the mix is good for everyone, right? Every face is unique. It's a miracle. No two faces are identical. Every face symbolizes life, and every life deserves respect. And no one has the right to humiliate another human being. Everyone has the right to dignity, and by respecting others, we honor life in all its beauty, magic, diversity, and unpredictability. Essentially, Skalk, what you're saying is that respecting others also allows us to respect ourselves. So thank you for your serious message. Much appreciated. Colleagues, without further ado, it really just brings me great pleasure. As I would have noted earlier on during the introduction, is that this publication launch, for those of you who have received it, it is available online on the Ahmed Kathrada website, and we are shortly will be sending you all the publication, the physical copies, led by Retabile Razomo, who will be leading that work. And as I said, part of the publication, you will see that we have essays there of young people who are expressing themselves. We have artwork. We also have, poetry and so on, right? So now I'm going to kindly call on the top essay writer for the 2024 edition of the publication, Katleho Seele, to read his essay and just take us into his own lived experience as a young person in this democratic South Africa, and his own views around race, racism, and how to advance a non-racial society. Katleho Seele.
Uh, Thank you so much for having me. As you've already said, I was the 2024 Ahmed Kathrada's essay competition winner, and I had written an essay titled "The Impact of Apartheid on a Born-Free Generation." And the essay reads: Apartheid, a system of racial segregation and discrimination enforced by the National Party government in South Africa from 1948 to 1994, left deep scars on so many of South Africa's background. As the born free generation, we are growing up in a South Africa that is vastly different from the one our parents and grandparents knew. Growing up in a democratic South Africa, I've often heard people refer to my generation as the born free generation, a term suggesting that we're free from the burdens of apartheid, free to carve our own paths. The reality, though, is this is much more complicated. Despite the formal end of apartheid, its legacy continues to impact the born free generation in ways that are sometimes subtle and other times greatly visible. This essay explores the multifaceted impact of apartheid on the born-free generation, focusing on education, economic opportunities, social relation, identity, and psychological well-being. One of the most significant impacts of apartheid on the born-free generation is the persistent inequality. During apartheid, the government systematically underfunded schools for Black South Africans, downgrading them to overcrowded classrooms, inadequate facilities, and poorly trained teachers. This was part of the broader strategy to ensure that Black South Africans remained subservient to the white minority with little hope of upward mobility. Even though apartheid officially ended in 1994, its educational legacy remains deeply entrenched. I am reminded of one of my friends, Lerato. She is one of the most intelligent people I have ever met, though she faces challenges that I, at first, did not fully understand until the day we were at the library studying together. Lerato lives in a township where her family has been for generations, and while I have access to the latest textbooks, internet, and extra tutoring, Lerato's school does not even have a functioning science lab. She has told me about her teachers who are passionate but overwhelmed, trying to teach large classes without enough resources. The more she shared, the more I realized how different her educational experience is from mine. That day when we were at the library studying together, Lerato struggled to keep up with some of the work, not because she was incapable, but because she had not been given the same opportunities to learn. This is a harsh reminder that the educational disparities created by apartheid are still very much alive. Today, many Black students still attend under-resourced schools in townships and rural areas, where they face large class size, poorly trained teachers, and inadequate facilities. As a result, they are often at a disadvantage when competing with their peers from more affluent, historically white schools. The ripple effect of this educational inequality extends far beyond the classroom. For many in the born-free generation, the lack of access to quality education perpetuates a cycle of poverty and limits economic mobility. Even with the constitutional right to education, many students from disadvantaged backgrounds are unable to achieve their full potential due to the lingering effects of the apartheid era policies. The reality is that many of us as Black students, even in the born-free generation, still face barriers that were put in place long before we were born. Apartheid was not only a system of political oppression, but also a mechanism for economic exploitation. The apartheid government designed policies to keep economic power in the hands of the white people, with the Black people relegated to low-paying jobs and limited economic opportunities. Economic disparities are another part of the legacy left behind by apartheid. While some of us can afford extra classes and the latest educational tools, others have to do with what they have. South Africa remains one of the most unequal societies in the world, with a significant wealth gap between different communities in South Africa. This economic divide remains a plain reminder of apartheid's enduring influence, where generations of Black South Africans were denied access to quality education, employment, and land ownership. Despite the opportunity that the democracy has brought, many families are still struggling to break free from the cycles of poverty that apartheid created. The born-free generation faces high levels of unemployment rates, with young Black South Africans disproportionately affected. Despite the government's efforts to promote economic transformation through policies such as the Black Economic Empowerment, the pace of change has been slow. Many born-free individuals still live in poverty, with limited access to basic services such as healthcare, clean water, and housing. The legacy of apartheid's economic exclusion continues to hinder the ability of the born-free generation to break free from cycles of poverty and achieve economic prosperity. Apartheid was a system designed to divide people along racial lines, creating deep social divisions that persist to this day. For the born-free generation, navigating this navigation is a complex and often fraught process. The concept of being born free suggests a generation of open-minded from the shackles of apartheid, but the reality is far more complicated. Many of us, as young South Africans, deal with issues of identity and belonging. Caught between the desire to move forward and build a united nation and the reality of living in a society still grappling with the ghosts of its past. Racial tension and division continue to shape social interactions influencing everything from friendships to opportunities for advancement, where one finds themselves feeling weird about the concept of working with or befriending a white person. For many in the born-free generation, our identity is shaped not only by the history of apartheid, but also by the ongoing struggle for equality and justice. We are often expected to be the forefront of a new non-racial South Africa, yet we continue to live in a country where race and class still determine access to opportunities and resources. This creates a complex and sometimes contradictory sense of identity as we navigate the challenges of building a unified society while dealing with the unresolved legacies of apartheid. Moreover, the born-free generation is faced with the challenge of reconciling the narratives of the past with the aspirations of the future. We are keenly aware of the sacrifices made by our parents and grandparents in the fight for freedom, but we are also determined to forge our own paths and create a better future. This tension between honoring the past and shaping the future is defining characteristics of our experience as the born-free generation. The psychological impact of apartheid on the born-free generation is another important aspect to consider. While we may not have experienced the physical violence and oppression of apartheid, we have inherited the trauma and emotional scars of our parents and grandparents. This intergenerational trauma manifests in various ways, from feelings of anger and resentment to a deep-seated sense of insecurity and mistrust. For many born-free individuals, the burden of history is a heavy one. We are constantly reminded of the injustices of the past, whether through family stories, community experiences, books, films such as the famous film Sarafina, and even in songs. This can lead to feelings of frustration, particularly when we see little progress being made in addressing the inequalities that continue to plague the country. At the same time, the born-free generation is also expected to be resilient and optimistic to carry the hopes and dreams of a new South Africa. This can create pressure, leading to stress and anxiety as we navigate the challenges of building a better future in the face of persistent obstacles. The psychological impact of apartheid is therefore a key factor in understanding the experience and struggles of the born-free generation. The impact of apartheid on the born-free generation is profound and multifaceted. While we have the advantages of growing up in a democratic South Africa with access to rights and freedom which were denied to our parents and grandparents, we are still affected by the lingering effects of apartheid. For South Africa to truly move beyond its apartheid past, it is crucial that the born-free generation be equipped with the tools and opportunities to overcome these challenges. This requires a determined effort from the government, society, and the private sector to address the structural inequalities that persist in the country. It also requires a commitment to fostering social unity and healing the psychological wounds of the past. We, as the born-free generation, carry the potential to create a more just and equitable society, but we cannot do it alone. It is the responsibility of all South Africans to work together to dismantle the legacies of apartheid and build a future where everyone has the opportunity to succeed and thrive. Only then can the promise of freedom truly be recognized for all. Yes, that was my essay for the...
Thank you very much, Katlego. I think what you've done really at the core of your essay is to, give us some lessons on some of the strategies for appraising the historical and economical and certainly cultural past that we have inherited. But I think also what you've done so well and so beautifully is to remind us that, 31 years into democracy, the past is already in debt to the mismanaged present, right? And I think, as Toni Morrison reminds us, is that besides, contrary to what we have heard or learned, particularly us as young people, the past is not done and it is not over, which is really another way of saying, it's still in process. And again, which is another way of saying that, when we critique the past, when we analyze the past, it certainly yields new information about itself, right? The past is already changing as it is being re-examined, as it is being listened to for deeper resonances, actually it can be more liberating than any imagined future if we, particularly as young people, are willing to identify its evasions, its distortions, its lies, and are willing to unleash its secrets. So thank you very much for that. Colleagues, we are certainly in good company. Next up, like I said earlier on, one of the mediums that we have as part of the anti-racism essay competition. Young people. You have young people like Atlewo who say, I'm best fitted to expressing myself by writing. Young people are sending in through their songs. Some people are poets. But next up on the line, we have Lukhanyo Mlangeni, who is really the winner for the 2024 essay writing competition through artwork. So this young person really submitted their artwork, and when the judges convened, they decided that this young person has captured this year's call, which has led us here to this publication. Lucanio.
Right. As the 2024 artwork winner, the title of my artwork was called The Echoes of Yesterday, Threaded into Our Foresight. So when I heard the topic of the impact of apartheid on the born-free generation, this inspired me to create an artwork that illustrates how the current generation can be indoctrinated from a young age to carry the emotional burden of those who experienced the apartheid era. So this often diminishes our own identity, and it has a heavy influence and is heavily influenced by the past. While modern society may denounce apartheid as a negative chapter in history, the reality is that many individuals harbor this subconscious racism, which was a significant factor in its establishment of apartheid. This highlights the title of my artwork, The Echoes of Yesterday's Threaded into Our Foresight, as it emphasizes that apartheid still affects and still permeates the current generation, echoing through time and being threaded into our lives. This is represented both literally by the red wool in my artwork and how it is threaded into our lives, and figuratively as it influences our future decisions. To convey this artwork, I used a mixed medium of charcoal, pen, pencil, and watercolor and red wool, and each medium plays a crucial role in the overall meaning of the piece. The focal point is a charcoal drawing which shows a youthful individual depicted as if they're fading away. This is this fading represents how, from birth, certain narratives from the apartheid era are shared, contributing to the racism present in modern society. This indoctrination hinders individuals from discovering their true identity as they are conditioned to view others through a particular lens. The figure's gazes directly into the viewer and engages, delivering a bold and powerful meaning. The fists depicted below the figure carry various meanings and are rendered in different colors, symbolizing both freedom and oppression, experiences deeply rooted in the history of apartheid. This duality invites viewers to interpret the artwork through their own perspective. Ultimately, these hands represent how the youthful individual is burdened by holding on to these elements of the past despite not experiencing apartheid firsthand. The red wool symbolizes restraint and is chosen for its association with blood, anger, and pain endured by the oppressed during apartheid. This artwork aims to raise awareness about the lasting impact of apartheid, encouraging us to acknowledge history without perpetuating harmful ideologies such as racism. Instead of repeating the past, we should foster an understanding of history that promotes healing, awareness, and a better South Africa.
Thank you very, very, very much, Lucanio. As you were taking us through your your art and how you went about it and just explaining it to us. You reminded me that indeed young people like yourselves who are artists are those people that sing the truth, right? And that is something that we as society have got to protect. So thank you very much for singing your truth and for sharing your lived experience with us. It's something that we do not take for granted. So thank you very much. Colleagues, it also gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who heads from Penryn College, which has really been a school located in the province of Mpumalanga that has really just supported this great work. And we know that teachers in all the different forms and shapes that they come in, their work takes teachers are the people who've made us, right? And really, we have here with us from Penryn College, Miss Michelle Boyson, will just really just give us perspectives, not only from that college and school, but also on why across all these years they've just supported this work and why it's important for our young people in schools or wherever young people are to participate in the national essay writing competition against racism. Ms. Boyson.
Good evening, Mukitsi. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure speaking today. On behalf of Penryn College, a small school with a lot of heart in Mpumalanga, we are very happy, and we've participated in this competition, not only for the accolades and the awards at the end of the day, but we do it for a different reason. The children, when they get into the class, they have different views, and we chat to them on a very, what would we say, informal basis, where we tell them, speak your mind, don't be scared, take risks, and have those uncomfortable conversations. And many of our scholars come from abroad or from different parts of Africa and South Africa, and many of them are not aware of actually what happened during apartheid. So we have taken part in this competition over the last 3 years. This is the third year that we're entering, and the scholars have really learned a lot, also about themselves, about other people's cultures, their beliefs. And as I said, we push them, we push the limits, and we have those uncomfortable conversations, which I think today some people are a little bit nervous in doing so. So our scholars are very diverse. They are not scared to speak. They're not scared to put down a paper and pen, or pen to paper, and they come up with amazing ideas. So my colleague and I actually sit down with them at the beginning of the session, and we really brainstorm, and we make it part of our syllabus. So we also then speak to the history department, the English department, and we're starting to expand into those departments, and hopefully we will have more experience there next year. So thank you very much for allowing our scholars to take part. And as I said, we don't just do it for the accolades and the prizes at the end of the day. We have some very talented scholars, and especially our artists are really doing well, and they're grabbing it by the horns, literally, and taking it further. And hopefully we can get this into different schools, because I think we need a lot more schools to take part and participate in this competition, and not really see it as a competition, see it as a dialogue, as a conversation. And I think with conversation and communication, we will heal. It will take time, but as I've said to my scholars, we need to respect each other and appreciate each and everyone's beliefs and views. No matter what color you are, everyone is equal and everyone has a voice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Boyson. And I think in these times, again, that we are navigating, where we are seeing so much censorship around schools, even in the globe. And I really just love what you said, that yours is a small school with a lot of heart, and really I think the work that you do alongside your colleagues takes second place to nothing, nothing at all, and really that yours is a first order profession. So thank you very much, Ms. Boyson, for your serious message and those lovely words. Colleagues, our next item really for tonight is to have a recital of a poem. So, like I said earlier on, one of the mediums that we've been exploring with this competition from 2022, in fact, when it was in its sixth year, was to say, let young people be creative. Let's allow our young people to be as bold as they can. And poetry was one of the mediums of which was adopted into this competition. And the top winner for poetry, the poetry section for 2024 is Sejal Mohabir, and I have noted from our colleagues that Sejal was not able to join us, but she or they did send a video for us. If I can just ask our tech team to spotlight that for us, please.
Hello everyone, I am the winner for the poetry category for the Khatrada Foundation. And I'll be reading out my poem and sort of discussing as to why I wrote it. So the poem is called In the Shade of the Olive Trees. Under the category is Zionism Racism. So in a land where desert meets the sea, where ancient walls whisper history, two nations rise with hearts of fire, bound by pain and deep desire. Zion's dream, a beacon bright for people lost in endless night, but in its light shadows grow on field where olive branches bow. Palestine, a name whispered in the wind, a tale of lands lost, hopes pinned, homes shattered, dreams displaced, in every stone a memory traced. Is Zionism a shield or spear? Does it protect or bring fear? For every wall that's built to stand, another tear stains the land. The rockets fly, the sirens wail. In this war, all sides pale. Children's cries, mothers' tears, echoes through endless years. On one side safety, another's plight. In this war, who holds the right? For every claim that's staked with pride, a broken heart lies just outside. Can a dream built on ancient pain grow without inflicting the same? A cycle of sorrow meant to last? The olive trees they stand to kill, witnesses to each wound, each kill. Their roots entwined yet torn apart reflect their rift in every heart. In the shadow of these ancient trees, can peace be found? Can hatred ease? Or will the land, soaked in strife, be bound to war for all its life? Because poetry becomes a way of wrestling with the unspeakable, such as injustice, displacement, loss, and the other profound contradictions of human history, I decided to write this poem as it deeply, deeply brings to light the heartbreaking issue that is happening in Gaza right now. When words fall short, imagery and metaphor can truly capture the pain that we go through and longing and the haunting questions that don't really have easy answers. The motivation that I had gotten to write this poem came from a deep empathy that I had for both the sides of the Jew people in the past as well as the Palestinian current conflict. On one hand, Zionism is understood as a dream or safety and belonging for people who had endured centuries of exile, pogroms, and the Holocaust. On the other, that very dream has meant devastation for Palestinians, whose homes, identity, and freedom are tied onto that same land. When writing this poem, I sort of kept asking the question, how can a movement born solely out of survival create new suffering? And can there ever be peace when histories are so entangled? It's very prevalent in society today because this conflict remains painfully alive. Not a relic of history, but a daily reality of airstrikes, checkpoints, settlements, refugee camps, and shattered families. Every headline brings the conflict back into the world's conscious, igniting protests, debates, and divisions across societies from the Middle East. In our interconnected age, it is no longer a distant conflict. It reverberates globally, polarizing communities, shaping politics, and stirring up debates on justice, human rights, and identity. It breaks my heart because at the core, this isn't just about ideology, borders, or politics. It's about children growing up under sirens instead of lullabies, about olive trees uprooted where families once found shade, about mothers on both sides mourning sons they'll never see again. The tragedy is that both people are bound to the land and to each other, yet their dreams of safety and belonging clash so violently that both are left wounded. And it's really sad and it's heartbreaking because it feels like it's a cycle that never ends. On one side, there's security that's brought at the expense of others' freedom, and every attempt at the peace is overshadowed by this fresh violence. The olive trees, an ancient and enduring, stand as silent witnesses to generations of loss, roots intertwined but unable to flourish together. That image captures the sorrow so perfectly. The knowledge that two people, so connected by history and geography, are trapped by division, unable to live in harmony on soil that could have nourished both. What makes it devastating is the sense of inevitability, that the fear that the conflict will go on repeating itself, inflicting new grief on new generations, unless humanity finds a way to break that cycle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sajal. I think what Sajal is reminding me of are the words of James Baldwin when he says, only an artist can tell what it is like for anyone who gets to this planet to survive it. But also a reminder of the words by E. E. Cummins that, war and chaos have plagued the world for quite a long time, but each epoch, colleagues, creates its own special pulse beat for the artists to interpret. And certainly, again, one of my favorite scholars, authors, Nobel laureate, Toni Morrison, when she says, this is precisely the time when artists go to work. There's no time for despair, no place for self pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language, and perhaps this is how civilizations heal. And with those words, thank you to all these brilliant young people. And, they honestly give me they make me proud as a fellow young person. And I think what they've done so well is to, lead us to our next speaker, someone who's played a pivotal role in this country, in serving it, and still serving it, to just give us a message of inspiration and call to action for us as young people. Advocate Mojanku Gumbi, who currently serves as the special advisor to the UN Secretary General on addressing racism in the workplace. This work began since 2023 for her, where she really just provides strategic leadership in combating racial discrimination globally. But also, Advocate Gumbi, colleagues, is currently Chancellor of the University of Venda, a position she was appointed to in 2020. She's the founder of Mojanku Gambi Advisory Services, a Johannesburg-based business advisory firm. And from 2018 to 2019, she served as Ombudsman of the University of Johannesburg. She was also a special advisor to South Africa President Thabo Mbeki from 1999 to 2008. But again, she didn't stop there, right? From 1994 to 1999, she was then advisor to the then Deputy President Mbeki, again in the Mandela administration. She's someone who's been actively involved in peacemaking initiatives in the region, in the African continent, and these regions are the Democratic Republic of Congo, Cote d'Ivoire, Comoros, Sudan, Lesotho, Somalia, Zimbabwe, Iran, and the Middle East. But also prior to serving in the presidency, Advocate Gumbi was an attorney from 1984 and an advocate from 1993. She holds law degrees from the South African Universities of the North, which we now know as the University of Limpopo, and of course the University of the Witwatersrand, my alma mater, and of course a certificate in trial advocacy from the University of Texas in Austin. Advocate Gumbi, the floor is yours, and it's an honor to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Mwaketsi. That was totally unnecessary, but thank you for the introduction. And thank you very much to the Katrada Foundation for inviting me to this very important but painful nation-building initiative. I participated in one in person a few years back, and it is quite painful to listen to the words and the experiences of young people, which remain very difficult. One phrase in this year's publication that you kindly shared with me caught my attention. I think in the introduction by the executive director of the Kathrada Foundation, he says that the youth have demanded that we stop looking away. Stop looking away. So what happens when you stop looking away and focus on the real challenge? When we stop looking away, colleagues, we see what Katleho was just talking about, what she writes about in her essay, that the racist system of apartheid is still with us. She understands fully that her friend Lerato is experiencing discrimination in real time as we speak. I think the advice that we get is that the first step towards addressing a problem or towards dealing with a difficulty is to name what that problem is. And so we should name it. Let us name it. We must acknowledge that we are where we are, two nations, just like the ones referred to in the winning poem. Two nations, one white and prosperous, the other black and poor, because someone sat down and planned precisely for this outcome. Professors at universities, thankfully not Professor van Heerden or Skalk van Heerden, professors sat down and designed this system. Priests sat down and found words to justify that system. Leaders. But the important thing to remember, especially for our young people, is that it was not always like that. And it's important to keep that in mind. In the 900 after death to about 1300, we had the Mapumbugwe kingdom as an example, which is in the northern part of South Africa, which shows that we had a thriving community that was trading with the East. They were using China, breakable glass, and all of that at the time when Europe was still in the Dark Ages. So it was not always like that. The transatlantic slave trade started around the 13th century. It was not always there. Colonialism followed about the 14th century. So it was not always like that, which means that it is possible to create a society that is egalitarian and non-racial. As young people, my message to you is that you should not be put on the defensive in an attempt to mask the fact that racism continues to be a challenge to date. This generation that we are talking to today, that we are celebrating today, must know a few home truths. One of the things that you have to make sure that you're on top of is to try to do your best to understand what we are dealing with. Do not let anyone lie to you. So what we are dealing with is a construction of a social construct, which is what racism and apartheid was. It is systemic, and yes, it can manifest at the personal level, as Skalk van Heerden just told us. But more importantly, it is a systemic part of racism that you have to address, and it can be addressed. That part is the one that tells you that apartheid did not end in 1994. Legal apartheid did, but even then, not all of it ended in 1994. So that racialized system can be dismantled. And you can dismantle it even with people that are unwilling, like the tribe that Skalk van Heerden is trying to talk to. Because they also did not participate, not all of them participated in the design of the system. They became beneficiaries of a system that some of them did not design. And it's important for them to understand that this system was designed with a particular economic focus in mind. When the West needed cheap labor, they needed to justify taking Africans as slaves to the West in order to build the economies there. So they justified it through a system of racism. So it is not at all a system that depends on individuals. It is something that we can, as young people that are here as leaders, we can deal with. Now, in South Africa, it was designed to cut across all sectors of society, as you know, social. We talk about segregated schools, as Katleho said, which we still have largely. What happens even at the schools that are integrated is something else. It reflects the apartheid legacy that we have. A friend of mine was telling me just today that their children who received Jewish symbols, holiday symbols today, apples and honey at the school. So I said to them, well, maybe you should take Palestinian symbols and see the reaction that you get. But I can assure you, as we sit here, that the school would say that no, children can't bring Palestinian symbols here, can't bring scarves, but the Jewish can do it. So we still have that as we speak today. This system also cut across the economic sector. It was not just a political system that was constructed. So it was social, it was economic. Today, I want to remind you that in South Africa, there's this phenomenon of the big four or big five. You've got the big four audit firms. You've got big four medical aid schemes. We've got the big four, big five law firms, the big four insurance companies, banks. Everything is structured around those big four. And when you look at the ownership of those, you find that ownership is not in the hands of the majority of the people. There are many people who would come and tell you that, no, but the Public Investment Corporation, the PIC, which is managing government pension funds, is one of the biggest investor on the stock exchange, on the Johannesburg Securities Exchange. Just go a little deeper into that to see really what kind of authority and power does the PIC have. So you've got this big four phenomenon that you still have to deal with. That tells you that this is an inheritance of our past. Even at a political level, yes, we have a new government, we have a parliament of the people and all of that. But if you step outside that and go to some of the people, I'll tell you two stories quickly. One was it's a early 40s young man who's a property manager, for one of these big property companies. So we were trying to find offices to rent. And I don't know how the conversation went to, at some stage we spoke about Nkosazana Zuma. So he says to me, who's that? So I said, well, she was first minister of health and then foreign affairs. African Union chairperson. It's like, I've never heard of her. I don't know who we are talking about. And I asked him, do you know who the president of the country is? He's like, no, as a matter of fact, I don't. Now he's a young white, property manager for a very big property company. And he has absolutely no interaction and interface with the government, which politically we think that has changed and represent the majority of the people. Another one is a lawyer friend, very good friend, white Jewish, and he says to me, "Hi, Mujamku, you know this thing about compliance with the BEE? I don't even understand it." So I'm like, "You mean your law firm is not BEE compliant?" He's like, "No, it's one of the big four law firms." So he says to me, "No, we don't need government work. You only need to be compliant if you need government work. But we survive without it. We don't need it at all." And I said to him, "You mean you are one of the biggest law firm here, and because of the old construct, you are carried by these companies that carry you, very successful law firm." And he says, "Yeah, they continue to carry us. We don't need any work from the government." Now, it is this reality that we need to confront, not what people tell you. But I must say that I'm encouraged by your engagement with this difficult issue. And as I said, we are going to create a non-racial society. And we're going to start with the systems to dismantle those systems, the constructs that I talked about. We just need to be brave enough to focus on the real challenges. We've heard Sijal tell us that the olive trees, they stand so still to witness, so still, they stand so still and they witness each wound, each kill. So we have our olive trees here that have witnessed each wound, each kill, but we know that we are going to emerge victorious. Lucanio also reminds us of the emotional burden that they carry, but recognizes that while the current generation carry this apartheid burden, we are going to deal with it. I want to end with a poem from one young person who's in the diaspora. Her name is Amanda Gorman, and an African-American young woman. And the poem is called "The Hill We Climb," and she read it at the inauguration of one of their presidents. But she says to us, she says, "For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it." And that is my message to the young people here. It was not always like that. There was light, and there will always be light. But we must be the ones who are brave enough not only to see it, but to be that light. Thank you very much, and congratulations to the winners and all the others who participated, because all of you are winners. I've read some of those publications. They are just painful, but we are grappling with the reality that this country is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Advocate Gumbi, for your serious words and message. And again, I think a reminder, as you were reflecting on those young people, that we should stop looking away, as was encouraged by Katlego. And I think really at the core of your message, is a reminder of this, that we all have a stake in this transformation work that we're trying to do, 3 decades into democracy, that really, most of our racial problems and conflicts, yes, they are rooted in racism, right? A systemic problem that functions at both institutional and certainly interpersonal levels. So thank you very much. Colleagues, we are left, we are shy of plus minus 15 minutes to take a few of your reflections, comments, or any meditations that you might want to make, reflecting maybe on the speakers and all those things. And I have noted that, we also have here attending a young person by the name of Bitumelo. Bitumelo essentially, received sixth place in the arts section. And Bitumelo, I know that you've been interacting by using the emojis and so on. If maybe I can start with you for your own reflections that you might want to share with us, and really what it has meant for you as a young person to enter this competition, but also to join us tonight with your peers. Bitumelo?
Thank you so much for that. Greetings, everyone. Greetings to the moderator and the representative of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation and to all the speakers. Tonight has been very insightful. It's always great to hear, as I did also mention when we got the chance to meet up in person, that it's always amazing to see that there are young people who are on the same page. But in addition to that, it is beautiful to see how, in as much as there might be that intergenerational trauma that a few of my colleagues have mentioned, there is still also an intergenerational willingness to move forward together. So it really does mean a lot that on here we are not isolated in terms of our representation, that we are gathering as people from all walks of life, with some of us with as much lifespan as some others have experienced. So it really does mean a lot to see the humility of those who have already made their mark in the space, in their willingness to pour into our cups as well. And it's really encouraging also to know that there are fellow young creators who are keen on using the creativity they have to really speak up and to give room for a message that is so much bigger than ourselves, considering also without taking too much time, just considering also how much we have sort of been conditioned as a generation to look at our own situation and be caught up in what's happening here. But just for us to look back and look into history and also acknowledge the impacts of Western imperialism on the places that we are said to want to be a part of, just so that we can be that successful Black young person, and to really see how we are grappling with these ideas and know that we are not in it alone, that there are people who are willing to lend us an ear and assist us in knowing how to move forward, and to remind us that it wasn't always this bad, as Advocate Gumbi just spoke about. Just knowing that our ideals, in essence, all I'm getting at is that knowing that our ideas aren't something that we are just pulling from thin air. It's a great reminder to see that there is hope indeed, and we are not just being reckless young people, or we are not just in our own minds in this fairy tale, but it's beautiful to see that there is a way forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bitumelo, and I like that so much. So yes, we can hold two things at the same time: these contradictions, these ironies that we're oftentimes, or these complexities that we're oftentimes navigating, right? So what do we do? That yes, there is still this intergenerational trauma, but also, Bitumelo is saying, but there's also this intergenerational willingness to shape and move forward, right? And it's a responsibility we ought to share intergenerationally. Colleagues, as people are perhaps, raising their hands or picking up their hands to say they want to share the reflections, let me also go to Professor Andre Odendal, who wrote, the preface to this publication. Prof, apologies for putting you on the spot, but any reflections from you from tonight, from engaging with this great publication that's been put together by the Ahmed Kathrada team and these young people who've just really applied themselves and sharing their lived experiences with us. Prof Odendal?
Thank you very much, Chair. My views are in the forward to the publication, and I found it fascinating to look at the contributions, and in fact, one learns a lot. And what I couldn't help trying to point out is that our youth today are faced with massive challenges, and all over there are signs of them trying to meet those challenges with courage and in the face of adversity. And what I've tried to do in the forward is to point to historical precedents in which young people took initiatives in very difficult circumstances And one that I mentioned was the very beginnings of missionary education and what we could have called the digital natives of the 1800s, the young mission-educated people, as colonialism dominated in South Africa and spread across the Eastern Cape over 100 years. Mission stations and schools appeared all over Xhosa land, and of course Lovedale, St. Matthews, and Hilltown were amongst the most famous, where up to 80% of South Africa's black matriculants until World War II studied, and later Fort Hare in the 1920s emerged as a pioneering university college and then university. And it's amazing looking back from today how John Tengu Jabavu, at the age of 23 in 1884, started the first independent African newspaper, Imvo Zabansundu, or Native Opinion. And the views that the people put forward at that time, the poetry of Jonas and Siko, and later S.E.K. Mkai and so on, how those intellectuals basically opened up new ways of thinking and imagining the future. And the idea of an inclusive South Africa and the first political organizations, proto-national organizations, started there. At the height of colonial conquest, African young people started thinking of alternative ways in the future. And in sport, for instance, as well, by 1897, there was already a South African colored rugby football board and South African colored cricket board, which had constitutions that specifically said we don't recognize divisions of race, class, nationalism, or religion. And in relation to the whites-only rugby and cricket boards that were formed, those people of the 1890s, those young people, their views essentially later became the official views of United Cricket Board and, the change that came with democracy in South Africa in sport. So we've had the 1940s with the Lembede generation. We've had in every generation since that time, we've had original thinkers coming from African people and young people in apartheid and colonial societies, and today facing the unfulfilled dreams of freedom in terms of the systemic, enduring nature of apartheid and colonial inequality in terms of economics and so on, that we face this terrible exclusion of so many young people from the mainstream economy, going with all sorts of political issues and climate change that young people have to deal with. But I think it's in the nature of young people to be courageous, to be brave, and to look forward with hope, even in difficult circumstances. And that's the feeling I got when I read the articles as well. And it makes one realize that the future is in their hands and they've got to shape it as well as they can. And that always happens through struggle. So non-racialism is not a reality in South Africa. It's a dream that people have struggled for many years, and a kind of African universalism. Ubuntu is basically also at the heart of non-racialism, of Black consciousness, of Pan-Africanism, and so on. And besides political answers, we have to find ways in which young people can navigate society and find safety and dignity and education and shelter, very basic things. And I can only wish them well, really. I'm starting to waffle a bit, but it's a
Yeah.
really profound voices that we're hearing here in these contributions. Thanks, Chair.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Odendal. Colleagues, we are left with plus minus 6 minutes. For those of you who haven't spoken and wanting to share reflections, I do note we have Herbert Love, Plantina Seepenkuzana, Sibusisi Wemlangeni, Sis Lusanda Neshitenze, Karen April, Zora, Jackson Maeta, Ubab Mandla Nkomfe. Any last words that you might want to share with us or your own reflections on tonight or the publication, if you have the opportunity to engage with it before we wrap up? All right, I'll take silence as golden. But perhaps maybe someone to give us the last word. And I'm so sorry to put on the spot, but someone who's really just championed this work and is championing it at the foundation, the Advancing Non-Racialism Manager, Tabile Ratsomo. Any contributions or reflections that you might want to do? Maybe a last word from you as someone who, advances this work and really works tirelessly to make sure that even we got here to tonight in terms of this publication, but also the multiple reaching out to the different schools and the workshops and so on. Retabile, you don't have to switch on your camera.
Thank you so much, Mugezi. You did put me on the spot, but it's okay. I think much like what Andre has said, a lot of my views are encapsulated in the publication. But I think it's important to recognize in this moment as well that, this competition is not a competition that is just pulled off by ourselves as the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, but that it takes a whole group of people to pull this off. And just to give my thanks to them, because it can be very demanding to manage this project. And I know there was a lot of frustrations even with us not being able to announce the winners by the end of 2024. But just to thank everyone for their patience, people who willingly give up their time to make sure that we honor the voices that contribute to this publication through entering the competition and making sure that their voices are seen and that they are heard. To thank teachers just like Michelle, who make sure that their learners actually engage with this kind of content, who make them actually think about a life beyond that of the school walls. And for that, there's not enough thanks I can give because it makes our work just a whole lot more easier. So I think, that's the only thing I can share at this moment. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight as well.
Thank you very much, Retabile. And I think with that said, colleagues, allow me to express also my own gratitude to the team for inviting me to be the moderator for tonight, but also to the speakers, Skalk, Advocate Gumbi, the young people who spoke so eloquently, and Katleho, Sejal, and I might be forgetting a few names, Bitumelo as well. And really just the young people who've just taken on this work to say that, yes, I think as Dumelo said, that yes, we might have intergenerational trauma, but certainly we must also have that intergenerational willingness to make this country work, this continent work, but also I think the globe work as well. So we are being called on to be global citizens and not merely taxpayers or whatever the media labels are at the time. And allow me to just also wrap up. One of my favorite sociologists, I'm a sociologist in training, Alvin Toffler, talks about how the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And just thank you for your time tonight and allowing these young people, with yourselves as well, to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And we are going to end it here. And once more, thank you for your time. It is not taken for granted. And also just thank you to the admin team and the tech team that have been playing a pivotal support, and even the social media team as well. Enjoy the rest of your evening. or morning or afternoon, or wherever you're joining us in the world. May it be safe and warm with your dearest in here. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.